But Mike, as you mentioned, there was a Senior Bowl this weekend. Carolina had 3 players there. I don't even think that I know Kennard didn't play. I don't even think I saw TJ play, but Demetrius Knight did.
Yeah, he did. But believe it or not, that's not even who I'm talking about. Here's how the Senior Bowl has changed, and I went to a couple of them. My first job was in Columbus, Georgia, and that was not too far away from Mobile. I remember seeing Jake Plummer perform, and back then, I remember as just somebody who was a fan, like in high school, and watching and obsessed with the NFL draft. Alvin Harper had this great Senior Bowl, and that propelled him into being like the 13th overall pick to become the Robin to Michael Irvin's Batman for years and years in Dallas. And he was out of Tennessee, and he was known as a great athlete and a high jumper, but the Senior Bowl is what made him a first-round pick. The game back then was everything. Mm-hmm. Now, like so many other showcase all-star games, players opt out. The lack of intensity is it's just not the same. But the week in practice where you get all the reps in front of all the scouts, that's where a lot of guys make money. That's where a lot of guys move up, because I don't think the people watching take a lot of the game itself, stats and actions too seriously, because at times it almost looks like a Pro Bowl. Right. Where it's not max effort, everything's vanilla. But I'm here to tell you, TJ Sanders, in the week of practice, all of a sudden I started seeing him pop up on more and more first-round boards. Mm-hmm. He had a play, and it went viral. I think Trevor Sikkema, who's most famous for being Alyssa Lang's husband. No, I'm just kidding, Trevor. But Trevor does a great job in covering this stuff in the NFL. He posted somewhere on social media Sanders, again, and not in the game, but in the actual drills where you're given, it's mano a mano, so you're given 100%. And he destroyed, I forget the guard's name for LSU, but pretty good player. And he just absolutely annihilated him. So he a lot of people were talking about Sanders after the week of practice. Forget about the game for a second. I know a lot of guys made different plays in the game itself, but I would not be surprised if Sanders winds up being the first player off the board in what should be, as we've talked about, and JC's talked about a number of times, a record-breaking year for Gamecocks in the NFL draft.
Could be. I mean, I'm still going to personally put my money on Nick Emanwori.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that you're wrong in any way, shape, or form.
He's interesting, Jamie, because I've seen boards that have Nick as high as 17.
Me too.
And then I've seen several boards that do not have him in the first round.
Yeah, so, this morning he's 30th from Matt Miller at ESPN.
Yeah, and
they've
who
got
also
him
does
going
a good
to Buffalo.
job.
Yeah.
Right. I read the Bucky Brooks mock last week on the show, and they did not have him in the first round. In fact, they didn't have a Gamecock at all in the first round. He had him in the second, but it all depends, and it depends on needs. Now, there's a lot of really good defensive linemen in this draft, both interior and rush outside. So a guy that might ordinarily be, say, a top 15 pick could slip to the second round, because a lot of it's based on the numbers. So how many safeties are there? We all know Emanwori, from a physical standpoint, not to mention a productivity standpoint, last year was and is outstanding. Then it comes down to a lot of teams. You know, we know this, like there's certain positions that have just been devalued. Running back gets all the play on that, right? Like a Saquon Barkley or a Bijan Robinson, those guys still are too damn sexy to pass up in the first round. But you can also get a really good running back in the fifth round. Nobody drafts middle linebackers high anymore. Remember, that was the face of your defense, was the middle linebacker. That was the quarterback of your defense. So if you were a really good middle linebacker in college, well, you were going to be a high draft pick in the NFL. Well, now they're just like, no, that's not high on the list. Right. The top position, obviously quarterback's always going to be number one. D-line for a lot of teams is number 2, right there with wide receiver. So safeties don't always get selected highly because a press corner, a shutdown corner, is considered a more valuable commodity. There's fewer of those guys that can dominate the NFL level than a safety. So Eamon Worry could slip, just like Jamie Bradford just slipped, apparently. Eamon Worry could slip not because of anything he did wrong in the combine or whatever workouts or whatever else. He could just slip by virtue of the fact that some teams feel like, well, he's great, but he's a safety and we can get a safety later on in the draft. So much of this comes down to position scarcity. You hear that term a lot. Those of you that are in a fantasy baseball league, it's like for years and years, there's certain guys that were so good at one position, you would take them over the slightly better player, because if you got like a shortstop that could hit 35 bombs, well, that's more valuable than another great outfielder or first baseman. Same thing in the NFL. They look at it as certain positions are a dime a dozen, whereas the position scarcity is so great that you overdraft, that you draft higher than you ordinarily would. So I think that plays a factor in all this too. But I think TJ Sanders actually made, whether or not he goes first round, who knows? But I think he actually made some money this week in Mobile.
Yeah, this next two and a half months is going to be as fascinating as a follow as it's been in quite some time in Columbia with their football players, because I don't know of any of the guys. I don't think any of the guys that we have that we know are in contention to be draft picks, I don't know that any of them whose stock is going to slide. I think it will all continue to improve. If it does slide, it's not going to be anything significant or anything like that. I mean, you bring O'Donnell Fortune into the mix now. He's a guy who his name is going to continue to come up. He's done this for the last 2 years. He gets forgotten about, and then you watch him play, and you're like, wow, that kid can play. These things are going to continue to happen.